think now Peter is going from the Agency for Culture and Palaces. He's going to say hello in Danish.
Yeah, I can also do it in English, but I think yeah, great to see all of you. I think I'll just keep it in English for now, and then you can decide later on what you're going to do. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. And I'm from the Agency for Culture and Palaces, and we are the Secretariat for the Danish Arts Foundation. So I am saying welcome on behalf of the Committee for Performing Arts Project Funding, and this initiative was something that was concocted a couple of years ago, and Karen was assigned, or WILDTOPIA was assigned as the project lead, and has bravely been fighting on, albeit that everything has been very difficult to plan with these pandemic challenges that have been. So we're looking forward to move towards 2022 and hopefully finally be able to launch EdFringe basically for the Danish participation. And now, of course, you're going to enter into a couple of different workshops that are led by Karen, with guests from the Karen invite. And this initiative is in line with the aim of the Committee for Performing Arts Project Funding in their way of working towards strengthening arts in Denmark through meetings with arts abroad, and also strengthening performing arts from Denmark going out into the rest of the world, meeting new markets and experiences. And I think one thing that I would say is, of course, welcome also very much to you, Jo. It's here. And then I would like to one thing that we can see when we work abroad with performing artists is that, of course, it's all about networking. It's about getting out there and meeting new venues, collaboration partners, and so on and so forth. But it's also very much about remembering that you're, of course, an ambassador for yourself, but also to some extent for the Danish arts scene, but also for each other. So when you go abroad, really remember that your network is only as strong as when you open it up. So your own little personal network will only grow from meeting other people's networks. So I think you should also really remember that this group is also a group that you can gain very much from. It's a select group of companies that the Performing Arts Committee has selected, in the sense that there is a high hope that this group will also benefit from each other. So I'm very happy to listen in today a bit. I will be in my little own bubble listening in, but and I'm very happy that you're all here. And yeah, so welcome on behalf of the Performing Arts Committee. Thank you so much, Karen, for organizing that.
Thank you so much, Peter. I don't think I'm gonna say a lot of things right now. I'm very much into let's get to work, but actually I would like to just have a brief introduction of all of you here right here. So also that Jo Mackie, the producer, one of the really great producers, who's been at EdFringe a lot of times, so that she also knows who's in the room. And actually, I also invited Sissel Rostrup. She's not, she hasn't been funded by the Danish Arts Foundation, but she wrote the other day, "Oh, what's happening with the EdFringe? Are still doing this Danish showcase?" And I said, "Yeah, please come to this workshop." So yeah, and I really very much like what Peter said, this thing about that we are, when we go abroad, we can support each other, and actually we can strengthen each other's networks also by supporting each other with, like, oh, I know this guy. Oh, you are interested in that thing. Then you should actually meet my Danish colleague who's like that. So yeah, but please, I'm just going to say the names. No, actually, I'm just going to hand over to Sarah Hemming. And ask you to say your performance, what work you are working on, very briefly, and what you are looking forward to, or what you're curious about to get to know about EdFringe, and then you give the torch to another person in the room. Okay.
Yeah, my name is Sarah Hamming, and I'm working from the production platform Moribund. Our producer is called Mary Patterson, and she was not able to be here today, but she will listen to the recording and etc. And we are bringing the performance English Speakers, which is a sound installation about the English language performed only by speakers. And we're really curious, of course, to go to an English-speaking country and to Edinburgh to sort of maybe detail the performative experience of the piece with the audience there. And I will give the torch to the other Sarah.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, I just need to make sure that I'm muting myself. Yes, my name is Sarah. I work with Karen at WILDTOPIA as a production manager. I participated in the latest Danish showcase, the last Fringe, and it's very exciting for me to see how Danish performing arts are evolving and how they are being seen and anticipated internationally. So I'm rather an observer here now. Oh, yes, and I give the word to Jo.
Hi, it was really lovely to meet you all, and thank you for having me. I am here obviously to do a little presentation in a minute and then to have some conversations with you. I'm a theatre producer, but I work across dance and circus and live art and lots of different art forms. And I suppose why I'm here is that I've got actually probably about 15 years of experience in Edinburgh. The last 10 years I've been pretty much every year, and then before that sort of sporadically. But I've been up there as a performer, as a director, mainly as a producer, but also programming and curating and doing awards assessment and the whole lot. And so I suppose I have quite a good oversight of like everything about Edinburgh really from all of those perspectives, and I've worked on quite a range of very bespoke, quite bonkers things, so have an understanding of like trying to put those on in the context of a festival. So yeah, that's me, and I will give the torch to Annette.
Hi there, I'm Annette. I'm international producer with Fix and Foxy, and we're going to present Rocky, which is a show about what happens when the underdog comes to power, and it features a pig, a dead pig, Morten Buren as an actor, and then a right-wing politician, which in this case will be somebody who we find in the UK. And I'm curious about, everybody says that it's a good thing to have a long run, and also have the producer there for a long time, maybe even throughout the run. So I'm a bit curious as to how to make the most of my time there. And yeah, so I don't get, I think it's easy to get completely lost in this big circus. So that's what I would be happy to be more knowledgeable of. Thank you. I'm passing it on to Torben.
Hi there. My name is Torben, and I'm the artistic director and general manager of Theatre Catapult in Aarhus, Denmark. We are bringing The Insider to the Edinburgh Fringe, hopefully. And The Insider is about maybe the biggest financial scandal in the history of the world. Where 410 billion Danish kroner, I don't know what it is in euros, were robbed from the states around Europe. It's a production in 3D sound, so people are sitting with earphones, and I could tell a lot about the production. I have visited Edinburgh Fringe since 2011, so I know a lot about this fantastic festival, and but I don't know so much about producing. I mean, we have never brought a production to the festival, so I'm very curious on how to do that, and be more wise on that subject. So yes, So I can bring it on to Malene.
Hi everyone, my name is Malene and I'm the producer of Don Gnu, physical theater and film, and we will bring a production called Walkman to Edinburgh last year. It's about, it's for male actors, and it's about how we interact with each other in the public spaces. Yes, and we have been to Edinburgh several times before. I think this is our 4th time coming with a show. And I was a bit late. I'm sorry for that, sir. I'm not sure who hasn't said anything yet.
I think it's Sissel, Nikolai, Sigrid, and Katrine.
Okay, well, Nikolai, maybe you can go on.
I certainly can. Hello, everyone, and I'm here on behalf of the Sisters Hope performance group. And actually, in 2020, we were supposed to go to EdFringe, but we couldn't. So we have some travel funds from that point. And then this year, we did a pitch of the work Sensuous Governing, which is an intervention into an actually city hall. We have done it in Copenhagen in 19, I think it was, and next year we want to go to Fringe and then create the network, and then we would love. The ambition is to show this work in the year after. And I will pass it on to Sissel.
Hello everybody, my name is Sigrid Orkvik and I work as a freelance producer. For next year edition of Edinburgh Fringe, I'm bringing 2 companies that are going to present something at the festival. One group is Grandhøj Dans, which is going to have a showcase at Dance Space the whole month of the festival. And then I'm also presenting Theater Freeze production. And for this, it is a monologue about the forced centralization in Greenland, performed by a Greenlandic actress, Makka Kleist. And for this show, we are still looking for a venue. Yeah. And sorry, I was also a bit late, so if this introduction was a bit off, I am sorry. I'm passing it on to Sissel.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sissel. I am co-artistic director of London-based company Secretariat. We are brand new. We're very emerging, especially in this company. So I'm very grateful to Karen for inviting me along. We're working on our first show, Hex and Hammer, which is a verbatim and clown piece that links the witch hunts to incel culture. And we've just done showcases of it in London, and we're going to take it to the Waltz Festival, and then we are hopefully going to take it to the Fringe. And we're very keen. I'm a Danish theatre maker. My creative partner is Polish American. Everyone involved is sort of from all over the place. So I'm just sort of incredibly excited to meet a lot of other people producing performing arts internationally, and very excited to hear what everyone else's experiences with going to the Fringes, but also just sort of figuring out what people are doing. It's very exciting. And I'm going to pass it on to, I think, has Katrine, have you gone?
No. Hello, I'm Catherine, and I'm also with the Catapults, and I'm in the administration and have been the production manager of Insideren, as Torben just mentioned. I'm here to be extra ears for Torben because I'm trying to grow a baby right now, so in a couple of months I will be doing something else, but I'll be extra ears for Torben. I think.
Yeah, that was actually it. Yeah. So nice to hear all of you. And then the torch is so much at Jo's corner. Thank you so much.
Yeah, really, really lovely to hear from you and to hear about all of the work that you're bringing, and very excited to hopefully be there and see it and meet you all in real life. So I think we've got about 45 minutes. What I've got is sort of 3 sections, looking at production planning, budgeting, and then sort of well-being and generally kind of sort of planning around that for the festival. I probably will say some things that a lot of you will know, so I'm going to try not to spend ages on the talking bit of it, so that we've got proper time at the end of it for having a conversation and for you asking specific questions about your shows and things like that. So yeah, please keep a note of questions that come up as we go through, and I'll try not to talk too fast as well. So the first thing I was going to talk a little bit about is just general production planning and all of the things that you need to think about. The first thing I would actually just before starting that to say, in reference to something Peter said, is that one of the absolute greatest things about Edinburgh, I would say that 10 years, having done it for 10 years, that my whole artistic community in the UK and internationally is absolutely about 100% bigger and richer as a result of Edinburgh. So it's very much, Edinburgh is really, really about kind of creating a community and a family, and there's things that you can sort of do to structure your Edinburgh to kind of allow you to be able to do that. So but it's really, really great for that, and really exciting sort of place to sort of build that. So the first thing in terms of production planning is to have the conversation. What is your show? What exactly is your show? And what are all its really specific needs? Does it fit into a traditional model? Does it not fit into a traditional model? What are the most important things about it that you need to make sure you've got at the forefront of your mind as you start to have conversations with venues and producers and teams? So, for example, 2 years ago, I took a show to Edinburgh on a giant swinging stage that was 1/2 a ton, and so sort of the very most important thing that I had to spend over a year talking about with the festival was how do we adapt our show to fit into the very tight turnaround times that you will be given in Edinburgh. So because there are so many shows, there's very often really, really tight amounts of time in between each show. So the first conversation that we had was about how on earth are we going to do that? And it took us about a year of planning and having to test things beforehand in London and in various different places to do that. And it was also quite a difficult thing to negotiate with the venue in a contracting sort of for our actual contract. So I would say that with your show, if you have a show that's made, what are the things that you can't compromise on? So if for example, if it's a sound installation show, then obviously technical elements are going to be super, super, super important. And you need to make sure that from the very outset, at the very beginning of all of the conversations that you're having, you're making very, very clear what the things are that are fundamental to making that show work in the context of Edinburgh. And then sort of moving on from that, one thing that comes up a lot in Edinburgh is if you have an already existing show, you're almost certainly going to have to make adaptations to it to make it work in the context of the Edinburgh Festival. So that might be on the space, on the size of the space that you're given. It might be on the spec of the space that you're given, the height of the ceiling, where the lighting can go. It might be on the amount of time, you might have to shorten it. It might be something to do with the content of the show that's very culturally specific, that you need to think about the language or sort of, so I would start sort of having conversations now about what those adaptations might need to be, because they will require probably a lot of thinking and a lot of planning, and it's really never too soon to start planning for Edinburgh. That's one very big piece of advice. Never too soon. other things, so for example as well, this show that I took that was on a swinging stage in Edinburgh, we had to have the front of the ushers and the ticketing people were kind of part of the show. And so we had to start having conversations about that really early on, because the way that ushering works in Edinburgh is that there are lots of people on casual shifts, and because our show was a sort of it was a deceit of the audience, we had to bring the ushers in on what was happening in the show, and that was a really tricky thing to sort out. So again, it's thinking through every single element of your show, that as it exists in the context that you're presenting it now, might have to change in order to make it work in Edinburgh. So then the next thing that's worth thinking about, and I wrote down a note, who was it that has the politician is going to be, was it Annette? Yes, so you're actually inviting an actual UK politician to be, that's absolutely brilliant and amazing. I can't wait to see it. So it's a really good example of of what are in the UK, we call them either participatory elements of the show or wraparound. So there's two slightly different things. It might be that within your actual show, you have participatory elements. So there was a Dutch show a few years ago, and it was a verbatim piece, and it was a conversation with, the show was a verbatim piece that was made up of interviews with local people about what the word home means to them. And because it was an international piece, it actually touched on a lot of political things around migrants and immigration and the movement of people through the world. And she needed to connect with about 30 or 40 local people in Edinburgh, so that when she got to Edinburgh, she could ask them all of these stories, and then she could integrate them into her show. So so think through, if there are things like that in your show, again, that will need a lot of planning, and it would make sense probably to have somebody on the ground in the UK that you're able to communicate with from now, or from as soon as you can, so that you can start working through all of those things that you might need. So I'm just keeping an eye on time. There's so much to say. So the next thing to just think about, obviously, is contracts and contract negotiations. So again, that's something, some of you sound like you have spaces already, and some of you sound like you're still going to be looking for spaces. It's really tricky because there are so many different venues in Edinburgh. It's quite tricky to know where to go. There's a huge amount of information online, but obviously you want to find the best possible space for your show, and that is going to involve lots of different elements. So what I would say is the first thing to factor into that search is the physical space itself. Whether or not a venue, because there's some really big venues that have loads and loads of lovely PR and marketing, and everybody knows about them because they've got 400 shows happening. And then there's a venue which has got 2 shows in it and nobody knows about, and the marketing is quite hard because you have to try and tell people more about it. But your show will be much more successful if you find the space that is physically best to put it in, and then work the rest from there. So that's a piece of advice that I would give. As you start to kind of get into your venue searches and having conversations, you're obviously going to be negotiating with venues around things like how long a time slot they can give you, which time slot they can give you, how much time you have at either end of the show, how much stuff you can fit into the venue, what the storage is in the venue, what the technical capabilities are of the venue, all of those things. So you're going back up to point number 1 of what are the things about your show that you can't compromise on. You're going to be starting to have negotiations around all of that as you go. We'll come on to this in budgeting, but with Edinburgh, it's really, really important to be very, very rigorous in thinking through every single element that needs to be costed, because it's Edinburgh venues and they're sort of pop-up venues, so some of them don't have an infrastructure all the time, all the year round. So you need to think about all of the technical things that you're going to need in that space to make your show work. Some of them the venue will be able to provide, and some of them you're going to have to potentially look into providing yourself if they don't have enough speakers, or if you need a particularly special projection, or whatever. So it's worth being very detailed about what you need from the outset, so that you can be asking venues all of these questions, like, we need this, and this. This is how it happens. This is how it happens. What's going to be a problem and what's not going to be a problem, and just be prepared to have really ongoing back and forth with the venues. And that's the only bit that can get it can feel a bit arduous, but it's really, really worth being quite rigorous about those conversations. And the other thing that I'll come on to that later. So the next thing that's worth thinking about, and some of you touched on this when you were talking about your companies, is team support. So what's the infrastructure in your company? Is it just you and you're sort of operating solo, or do you have how much support do you have in your team? And what I would suggest is thinking through what an average day in Edinburgh is going to be for you, and do you have the right support to be able to make that happen? So some of you have talked, I think it pays dividends. It's really, really worth trying to have a producer for as much time as you can, because it's tiring. We'll talk about this in wellbeing, but there's a lot to do every day for sort of 30 days in a row. And the more support you can set up around yourself, the better. So on an average day, there will be production and technical things that need doing. Obviously, you need your crew. There'll be marketing and PR things that need doing every day. And there'll be a lot of marketing and PR things that need doing every day. There will be constant production conversations about things like how many tickets you've sold and whether that's fitting in with your budget, your projections of how many tickets you thought you were going to sell. Are you going to set up a discount that day in order to try and get some more people in? Do you need to really quickly change some of your marketing because actually you've realized it's not quite hitting the mark or whatever? So there's always daily conversations and things that need doing. So it's really worth planning for that. The other things to think about in terms of team support are somebody who's able to be constantly networking. Well, we can probably talk about that in conversation because I'm sure you've probably got lots of questions, but somebody who is able to be at the beginning and the end of your show outside and there to meet programmers who are booked in, and then to talk to them afterwards, and then potentially to go and spend 3 or 4 hours talking to them afterwards and having conversations about, because if somebody loves your show and immediately wants to book it, you need somebody who can sit down in that window of time and talk through the technicals of the show, and potentially a booking comes from that. But it's really useful to have people who can do that on the ground, because nobody's on email. I mean, people are on email in Edinburgh, but you can get something out of a conversation in an hour that it might take 4 weeks of chasing somebody or 3 months of chasing somebody to have online. So it really, really makes sense to try and have somebody that's able to be there and do that. Now, it's also really important that if you're the artist, you're able to have some of those conversations. So it's really useful to think about setting up a sort of, I call a tag team, so that you can both do them. But as if you're performing in your show, then obviously you have a whole other set of things to be thinking about in terms of your performance and your time. And then the last thing on team support, well, 2 last things. One is to be thinking about the content of your show. So quite often a thing that comes up in Edinburgh is that people are making work that's about really challenging material, and sometimes that material is about themselves, and it might be to do with mental health or physical health or whatever. And so it's worth thinking about what, we'll talk about this in well-being, but what's going to be the sort of daily impact on you of performing something that might be challenging to perform. And if you're going to be doing that for 30 days, how much do you need to make sure that you're looking after your energy and your mental health, and might you need somebody else in your team who is also there, maybe in one of the other admin or marketing or producing roles, who can sort of be your we call it pastoral support, so somebody who's there to able to kind of help you and support your sort of well-being. So again, the next thing just quickly is to talk about tech specs and technical riders. As I'm sure you all are very, very clear in your technical specs and your riders. Obviously dealing internationally, you all speak brilliant English, shame on the English, but anyway, but one thing I would say is really, really useful to have is as much visual footage and material as you can in terms of either photographs or videos, but to be really, the amount of times in Edinburgh that I've been in a technical get-in and one of the venue team has gone, oh, I didn't realize that they had 100 lights in the corner in that bit or something, or like I didn't realize that the projection had to hit exactly that, and there's a huge, you know, suddenly everybody has to stop everything and you have to go and buy loads of stuff, and you know, then so it's really important to be absolutely crystal clear about what your show is in all of your tech specs. I would go to the side of giving way too much information rather than less, and sort of assume that the person you're talking to at the Edinburgh end, this sounds awful, but assume that they're like a child and they don't know what they're doing. And so the more that you can really explain something, the better. And it, yeah, as I said, it really helps to have as much visual sort of documentation of what you've got as possible. We've talked a little bit about turnaround times already, but in terms of turnaround times, it's useful to now start having a conversation, like, and mentally walk through once you've chosen, or once you're in the conversations about choosing your space, to mentally walk through what is going to have to happen in the turnarounds in between shows. So every day you arrive at your venue 30 minutes before you have to do your show, or 40 minutes, or whatever, and you have to, the show before you finishes, and then you get in. What exactly has to happen in that time? How many people do you need to make that happen? And then it ties back up with what the adaptations that you might need to make to the show are in order to fit into those really tight turnaround times. The next thing is sustainability. I think you've got a session on this later on a little bit, so I'll just sort of touch on it. The one thing I'd say about sustainability, and obviously that comes into your travel, how you travel here, what you're sharing travel with each other, sharing vans with each other, how you're going to store things, how many flyers you're going to decide that you print for Edinburgh, using sustainable materials, reducing your waste, all of that is all possible, but it's challenging in Edinburgh, and it makes sense as well to plan for that. So just one example of that is that 2 years ago, when we were taking the big swinging stage, I wanted to try and share our travel up to Edinburgh with as many other companies as possible. And the theory of that was great, but at the time that we were organising it, because all of our technical times had been very, very firmly set months before, the venues were unwilling to shift their technical turnaround times. So I had another company that was going to put their stuff in our van, but the venue at the other end had said, you can't arrive early. So that company couldn't come with us, because they would have arrived in Edinburgh with us with all of their stuff, and they would have had nowhere to put it for 24 hours. So so it really makes sense to start having conversations with each other to think about how you can plan ahead for that. I've put some links in the pack that I'll send over to Karen with some links to some useful Edinburgh Fringe links. Edinburgh created a thing called the Blueprint model a couple of years ago, which has kind of got their commitment to sustainability. So it's useful to have a look at that now, but it also is just useful to start really planning that in advance so that you can you can actually make those things happen. And then some final notes on just some stuff that's useful to say. Venue competencies, so like how good the venues are, how competent and capable their technical staff are and their marketing staff are, varies massively across the Fringe. And there's nothing really that you can do to control that. Because as I said, I think it's really important to be in the right physical space for your show. But it's really just worth knowing there are some venues who just will be not paying their staff properly, not giving their staff enough training. There'll be sort of casual staff that have only just come in a day before and they're changing their shifts all the time. And it's just worth knowing in order to plan for it not to be stressful for you. So almost sort of going back to team support and infrastructure, I think it's useful to think about kind of going, the venue will give you the space and the basics, and within that, I would advise to try and be as self-sufficient as possible, to have everything you need and to not rely too much on the venue. There's some things that you can't help who the staff are in between each show or whatever, who are going to help you do your turnarounds. But it's just a thing worth knowing. Another thing that comes up all the time is parking, travel and storage when you get to Edinburgh. So whenever the beginning and the end of the festival, you obviously have all your stuff come over. You may have more team members coming over that then are going to help with the beginning and then go back. And Edinburgh parking restrictions have increased hugely over the last 2 or 3 years because of how much the festival's grown. So it's very difficult to find quickly if you're like, oh, our person's arriving in 8 hours time, where are they going to put the van? You end up paying loads of money for having to park it right next to the venue or whatever. So again, it's all really easy to work out, but if you plan it in advance and just kind of think ahead a bit. It's really useful to find out, if you can, who is on before you and which show goes before you and which show goes after you. Because sometimes the venues are a little bit cagey about this and they won't want to tell you for whatever stupid reasons, but it's really useful to find out, make friends anyway, but also you'll find out that you end up helping each other in your turnarounds, and it's really useful to know what you're coming into so that you can again plan around it a little bit with the turnarounds. But it's also just it's one of the best ways to kind of make connections and friends with people on the ground and sort of support each other. And then the final thing, which I'm sure you'll all be hyper aware of, is just COVID prep. Obviously the new thing that you'll be having now, going back to the festival live, is all of the COVID related things that you now need to think about. So obviously Edinburgh venues can be quite small, depends obviously what your show is and which space you're in, but it will have, social distancing will potentially have an impact on your the amount of audiences that you can fit. So that will impact your budgeting when you're looking at your ticket sale projections. It might impact your turnaround times because you might have to incorporate cleaning and ventilation into the bits before and after your show. You might have, if you've got headphones in your show, which lots of different audiences are wearing, obviously that's something, I'm sure you're all thinking about this, but that's something that you would need to factor into cleaning headphones in between passing them, or so just thinking now about what COVID things you need to think about in terms of adapting your show. Okay, cool. I'm gonna just now read a list of things moving on to budget, that I think it's worth thinking about. There's not much explanation around them, and I'll send this list as well, so you've got it, you don't have to write it all down now. Just to speed through this bit and then leave enough time at the end. So things to budget for: this probably isn't even exhaustive, but it's quite exhaustive. The cost of accommodation. There's been a lot of changes in the rules around how much landlords are able to charge for accommodation, but it's very expensive. Edinburgh's the biggest festival in the world, and the supply and demand means that the landlords in the city charge a lot for accommodation. So that will be one of your biggest costs, depending on what your show is. Obviously travel, venue hire, excuse me. The fringe fringe registration fee, which is what puts you into there's one brochure that covers the whole fringe, and there's lots of smaller brochures that are sometimes between, you know, venues have with two other venues, they'll have like their own little brochure or something. There's a fringe registration fee which puts you into that. Sometimes there are compulsory venue marketing costs that your venues will sort of make you pay, like £500 for them to do sort of in-house marketing on your show. Again, this comes back to the contract negotiations. It's worth sort of asking really clearly, what does that include? And to then think about whether that's going to be enough and how much extra marketing support you need and all those kind of things. So marketing and PR, which I think you've got another session with at the end of this month with a brilliant person called Madeline. Artist fees, obviously. Production costs in terms of people on location, and production costs, all of the other production costs to do with freight, things that you're going to need to buy potentially on location that you can't bring over, all that sort of thing. Venue related production costs. So again, if they don't have enough speakers, or if they don't have bits of tech that you need, or when we took the stage, we had to buy £8,000 worth of truss structures. We basically had to build a truss structure within the venue's truss structure, so that which was strong enough to take our stage. Marketing fees, people that you might need to bring along with you to support you and your marketing on the ground, and then the costs of printing flyers through the month and social media marketing that you might want to do, trailers, anything under promoting your show. Well-being costs, so we'll talk about this in a minute, but it really makes sense to budget, to have a well-being budget, and that might include trips out of the city, physiotherapy appointments, osteopathy appointments, massage, depending on if you've got a physical, if your show is a physical and dance or whatever, then it's really worth factoring those in. They always come up, and it will make it really helps to enjoy and have a successful Edinburgh, to make sure that that is budgeted for properly, and then have a very healthy budget for unknowns. So the other thing that happens, and why it's really useful to have very rigorous contracting conversations, is that when you get to the end of the festival, the venue will inevitably have a series of things that you probably didn't know that you were going to be paying for, such as you didn't know, but somebody had to like drill a hole into a bit of truss to connect a cable or something, and they'll put in a cost for the person that had to come do that or something. So again, the more you can find out through your contracting conversations about exactly what you're paying for and exactly what's being covered by the venue, the better. But it just makes real sense to have a proper, healthy kind of unknowns budget, which is sort of contingency, but it's also really wise to have a very good box office ticket projections contingency. It's very hard to control how many people are going to come and see your show, even if it is the quality wise like the best thing in the world. It's a bit hit and miss in Edinburgh, and also quite often a lot will depend on the climate that year. So we don't know how people are going to feel going back to a real life festival for the first time. They might just want to go and see stand-up comedy for the whole month. That, you know, they won't, but it's very difficult to kind of predict that. So it's very useful to have a really good contingency for that. And then now COVID, a budget for COVID costs. Okay, and then whizzing through to the last thing, which I think is really often gets missed as a conversation in Edinburgh, and that's well-being. So Edinburgh Festival is absolutely bloody brilliant. It's like the best place to create the most wonderful connections of people all over the world, and you will have no idea what will come out of it for you. I promise you that if you go next year, you'll get to the end of the month and a door will have opened to something that you hadn't even considered as an opportunity, and you will have met the most brilliant people, and you'll feel like intellectually and creatively very nourished, and it's exciting and it's brilliant. It's really also very, very exhausting and mad, and I don't know if you have the phrase FOMO, like fear of missing out, is a very real thing in Edinburgh, because there's stuff happening every day, and there's always networking events, there's always some kind of like party or launch party or press party or like venue party or things going on, and there's also always people who will stay up having great artistic conversations, great networking conversations until 4 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes those are also the places where you form really important connections and friendships that will lead to future collaborations and people booking your show. And it's a place where you get to meet an international festival programmer and actually find out that bloody hell, you have this thing in common, and you spend hours talking about it in a pub, and that's great, and that's what Edinburgh's for. However, what I would say is that nobody can do that for 30 days in a row, and if you make a decision to not spend a night out, the same opportunity will be available to you the next night. It's really difficult to have that perspective on the ground, because it's really there's always stuff happening. So I think it makes sense to plan ahead for how you're going to sort of look after your physical and mental health and well-being. Like, think through how many days can you sort of go without having had a proper amount of sleep before that's going to really negatively impact you, and make yourself a rule that actually, if it's been 3 days and you don't really feel like you've then actually that next day you're going home to bed as early as you can, and you're looking after yourself and you're spending some time outdoors, and to sort of think ahead about that in terms of you as a person and how you look after yourself, and sort of structure that in, or make those rules for yourself before you go, have those conversations with your team, and make sure that you're all going to kind of be accountable for each other in that sense. Food and cooking. It's really important, like really nourish yourself well in Edinburgh, and it's also can be quite hard to do if you're running back and forth from venues and if you're doing stuff all the time. I think it makes real sense to plan ahead for that as well. Find out where the local supermarkets are, find out where there are restaurants near to you that are going to do the kind of food that you like. How are you going to plan your meals? Do you do a big cook at the weekend where you make up loads of portions so that you know that every day you can get nourishing, you can sort of nourish yourself properly? Entre and Good, I don't know how much you know the Ghent-based company. They just bought, I mean, to be fair, they had about 30 people across 4 different shows, but they bought a cook with them one year who was literally in their flat, was just there to make amazing meals. So yeah, you can do all sorts of things, like set up an online account with a supermarket a couple of months before to do a big food order when you arrive, so you don't even have to think about making sure that you've got stuff in. It sounds like a really silly thing to think about, but I promise it will make a difference to how much you get the most out of the month, and you sort of look after yourself. Book in days that you're going to leave the city. And even if it's for just a day where you go out and you do a big walk up Arthur's Seat, or you take a train journey, or you go down to the sea. But I would say, if you're going for the month, book in at least 4 days, maybe 3, that you know that you're going to be leaving what's happening in this mad, wonderful city, and you're just going to give yourself some sort of space away from it. Makes a huge difference to do that. Yeah, but going back to stuff around like the content of your work and if it's challenging, one thing that's quite big in the UK is the conversation around mental health and well-being in the arts, and there are quite a lot of people who exist who are wellbeing practitioners. So for a lot of UK shows I know will book in maybe 3 sessions with a wellbeing practitioner spaced out throughout Edinburgh, even if it's only on Zoom, to have just like an hour-long kind of check-in and talk through how you are, and give yourself the space to kind of to sort of do that. You know, it's like, it seems like a sort of a luxury extra, but just think about whether or not that might be something that's useful to you and or your team to kind of to budget for. I think that's, oh, and then also, yeah, going back to the sort of physical health, there's loads and loads of massage therapists, physiotherapists, osteopathists, dentists, sort of research ahead what the medical situation is, what's the kind of crisis number that you would need to call. I've had to deal with quite a lot with the Belgian companies, quite a lot of times when it's been like, oh God, somebody's been allergic to a thing and their arms got massive and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and they don't know what the emergency services thing is. And so it's been sort of really stressful. So create yourself a 1-page document which has a link to all of those things before you go, so that if stuff comes up, it's not going to throw you. That's it. That's the end. I'm sure I've missed a million things. But I think we've got about sort of 10 or so minutes now. So yeah, happy to just answer any questions or talk through any kind of things that you feel you want to know more about or discuss or whatever. Silence. Yes, Annette.
I think one of the things that I did not know about or were miscalculated when I did the budget was that I thought I could actually, we could make an income on ticket sales.
Yeah, you can.
And I realized that there's also something called a guarantee sum that you give to the venue, and that, calculating with actually having a ticket income is probably quite optimistic, even if you sell a lot of tickets, because the deal you have with your venue is not really favorable in your So I don't know if you can say a bit about that, because that's certainly something that I was not really aware of in the beginning, and maybe it's different from venue to venue, but yeah.
No, I mean, generally the Edinburgh is what we say pay to play. So you do set up, it's usually 60%, a 60-40 box office share, but you've had to pay an amount of money to be there. So if you manage to actually make a profit at the end of it, with all the costs that you've put in, and then with that share of the box office, then you would have done absolutely amazingly. So it's technically possible, but it's highly unlikely that you'll make a sort of profit from it. When I was talking about that, what I meant is that some people will include the box office money in their budget as an income, and it will feed into balancing out the rest. But if you are financially able to budget without having to think about ticket, without having to include box office sales, definitely do that. Yeah. But it's obviously so I don't mean profit, I just mean the money that comes from the people who buy tickets. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And then one more question. Then you said be there before and especially after the show, because if there are programmers and they need to talk to or want to talk to and stuff like that. So like just the fact there are programmers and they want to talk to you is a really nice situation. But how do you get to that?
How do you get the programmers in?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, so there's a number of routes into that. So one of the links that I've put as well is to a new thing that's been set up called Fringe Connect, which I don't know much about because it's only been set up in the last year, but it's basically you can register with all the Fringe services, and they've set up ways to basically connect with programmers. But the first stop, essentially, in answer to that question, is that when you register with the Fringe, you register with a thing called participant services, which is like Fringe Central, basically, it's where they have like the central database of all of the artists who are bringing work and all of the programmers who are booked in to see it. So the way that it worked the last time I was in Edinburgh is that you register your show, you fill in like loads of information for the participant services, which is about your show, like who's it for, what is it, who's it marketed at, what kind of space does it need, like loads and loads of information. And they will then send you so the list of delegates is like, I mean, hundreds and hundreds long, but they will then take all of your information and send you, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a bespoke list of all the programmers that would potentially be relevant to your show. So in the first instance, you would get given a database of emails and names and who that person is from. And then as far in advance as you can, you would start contacting those people to talk about your work and invite them to come and see it. And it's difficult because obviously they have loads and loads of shows to see in a very condensed amount of time. But yes, I would say sort of 1 to 2 months in advance, start contacting people, and if possible, contact people individually. Have as much, if you have visual material, the way to start those connections is like less talking and more showing if possible, or if it's audio material or whatever. And sort of it's really helpful at that point to have really striking marketing, or have really good marketing material and pictures and production pictures and things like that as well. So that's kind of the first stop. Then there are multiple other routes which we could probably have a separate session on. Obviously what I do in the UK is as a producer, I already sort of have a database. I know UK venues anyway, so I already have a database of UK venues, and I know a lot of people, so I would also send my emails to all of them. So I don't know how many Danish programmers there'll be, but obviously another strand of that contacting bookers is for you to contact all the people that you already know, or that you collectively know as part of this consortium, because I think you can also all help each other do this. So that's another thing. One thing I did in 2019 is that myself and 3 other independent producers from around the world who I have met in Edinburgh in the last kind of 10 years, we all had very different shows, but we felt that we shared a kind of value system about wanting to promote independent producing and independent, sort of, we didn't want to just be like part of a massive list, and we sort of wanted to show that independently we could do what we needed to do. So there are 4 of us, we each had very different shows, and we just really, it was very lo-fi. We created a really simple email signature which had a tiny picture of all of our shows, and we called ourselves, I can't remember what we called ourselves now, I'll find out and send it to Karen, but whenever one of us emailed a booker, a programmer, or we promoted our work, we would go, okay, if you're like, other shows that I think you really might love are this one, this one, this one. And so we sort of advocated for each other as well. So I think that it's also worth having those conversations with each other. And if you have international connections, having those conversations too, of going like, how else do we advocate for each other's work? And like as Karen was saying at the start, when you're having a conversation with somebody and somebody really likes your work, you're obviously going to go, there's a program of brilliant Danish work. Here's our little flyer, or here's, I'll send you an email and then just look in my signature. So there's multiple ways that you can also promote each other's work, and that's again, as with everything, like it's useful to think ahead a little bit about that. And then there are sort of basically what you really want to do is find out as much as you can about who's going to be there in advance, and spend time with that list, and spend time finding out who you think is going to be relevant to coming to see your show, and then invite them basically. And then also there are various, I think part of this consortium, I think Karen, you were saying, is that you'll be setting up some networking opportunity, you know, some sort of generic like program launches at the start where you'll also get along, you know, as many programmers as possible to those. So in the first week of the Fringe, there will be a lot of generic launches, venue launches, press launches. So it's useful to have more people at the start, to go to as many of those as possible, because again, the more conversations that you can have in person where you hook somebody into the idea of your show, the better. And then business cards as well, really, really useful. And then you just swap business cards and you go, right, I'll send you an email now. And then you go and get on your laptop and you go, really great to talk to you just now. Here's the timings for our show. I'd love to see you there. Let me know if you want a comp or something or whatever. So yeah, multiple routes, but the first stop for the most amount of emails is the participant services at the Fringe, which you'll have to register with when you register your show. And I think I've put a link into a couple of the Fringe services things in the pack.
That's really great. I can only add that we have had it has been our experience the other years also that the Fringe, they're really helpful, and I think that we also developed like this. I think they're really helpful, and so they do supply all these lists and so on. So people have to sign up for it. But also that's also something we'll support you in, with this thing of sharing who's actually there. And we'll do some common invitations. But of course, just like Jo says, it's really important that all of you take a responsibility for your own shows. But we'll be there for support, and we'll do supportive things.
And also just, it's worth looking soon at Fringe Connect, because again, what they'd set up 2 years ago when I was in Edinburgh is it was basically that I think some of the venues, some of the bigger venues have kind of all got together and they've set up their own sort of way of marketing the shows promoting the shows in their venue. So for example, the director of the venue that we were in, like in week 3, once he knew all of the shows and everything, he was like, oh, okay, I've got my list of my list of people that I think would really love that. So he sort of, you can then sign up separately to another database, but it's a bit more bespoke because it comes from somebody who's seen your work for the last 3 weeks and knows it and feels like they've gotten to know you a bit. So I think that's what Fringe Connect is. So it's definitely worth having a look at that. But I also think that, yeah, as Karen was saying, the more you can do to promote your own work and set up and promote each other's work, the better, and the more conversations you can have on the ground with people, the better.
Yeah, and I think because it was actually some of the ones who participated in the Danish Digital this year realized that was quite confusing with all the different platforms. So we're going to do a visual this next time, because it is actually quite confusing with all the different platforms. I did experience the Fringe Connect also when we were there in 2019, and I think that was on a testing out basis at that time. And they've developed on it in the digital framing, and then I think so I'm having a meeting with the French Society in the end of this November. We're in November now. So I'll also ask them to make something so it's clear. Also you use your time in the right way, because of course there's also, I mean, then there's a lot of platforms, but which ones are actually the right ones? I think if there's one final question, like a burning, aching question, I think we should have that. Otherwise, we should go and have a break and say thank you so much to Jo. But is there any hot burning question inside your chests? Then now's the time. Yes, Sissel?
Just sort of very quickly, if there is a quick answer, is what to look for in a Fringe producer, because we're trying to find we're UK based, and we're trying to find a UK based producer to help us go to the Fringe. And what would you say are the questions you should ask, or like the qualities to look for in someone?
I think actually my answer to that is quite simple. The first thing I would say ever in terms of looking for a producer is find somebody who understands your work and who loves it. Because the only other answer in terms of fringe producing is the same answer to any producer, which is incredibly organized, rigorous, really hardworking, and those things all apply. I think if it's somebody who's never been to Edinburgh producing, I think it would be most UK producers have had experience of the Edinburgh Fringe. So, but if it's somebody who hasn't, that's the only red flag I would say, just because if you've never been there, it can be a bit of a baptism of fire. Right. I would be wary of working with producers. I say this, but I've been one of these producers, but I would be wary of working with people who have too many other shows going on. Because of the funding system is a bit screwed, well, it's very screwed up in the UK. Quite often we have no choice but to have multiple things going on. Yeah, like anything, you know, if somebody's not slept for 20 days and is producing like 6 shows, then they're not going to be able to sort of support you. But yeah, so I think the most important thing is to really, really understand your work and to love it.
Thank you so much.
And I'm really happy to, like, if you have more questions or want to have conversations, then Karen, I'm happy for you to sort of pass on my email address or whatever, and you're very welcome to contact me. I'm in an absolutely insane job until December the 12th, and then I'm free. So I may not be quick to respond between now and then, but you're very welcome to contact me, and then after that as well. And I can make connections as well, like going back, for example, to the thing about if you need to get like a group of school children who are going to come and sing a choir in your show or something, or whatever, then I can connect you with people in Edinburgh on the ground, and sort of other connections as well if you need.
Thank you so much, Jo. It's very generous of you, and that's also how I know you, as a very, very generous person, a very, very generous spirit. It's so lovely that you spent your time with us here. Oh, yes. And thank you so much. Now we're just going to have a short break. We're a little bit behind schedule, but I think it was important to get the last things from Jo here. So we'll just have like 10 minutes break now. And then when you come back, I think we'll actually go directly into the applications or the venues, because I can see some of the venues programmers, they have now arrived. But right now, a break. So we'll be back here at like 11:18 it is. So looking forward, and thanks a lot, Jo.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's lovely to meet you, and good luck. And hopefully I'll see you all next summer.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
You too.